Hey, good afternoon everybody. Today I'm going to show you how to make Nanaimo bars. This is a distinctly Canadian treat. There are literally nearly 100 or more variations on it. I did some experimenting. I found what I thought was a really good recipe. I did change it a little because you're allowed to. And I came up with what I think is a really good version of this. Now, it's got a fairly intimidating long list of ingredients. But it's made in 3 layers. So here's the total list of ingredients so you can go shopping. And then after, what I'm going to do is give you the pieces again as I do each layer. There's very little cooking involved. It's basically just putting it together. So let's get going. This recipe traditionally calls for a double boiler for the first stage. Now, I don't own a double boiler, so I use a regular saucepan and a bowl. So you put some water in the bottom, and what's important is the bowl not touch the water. Now, if you're not sure, take the bowl out, take a look at it. If it's wet, you've got too much water. If it's dry, you're fine. So start that on fairly low heat. And while that's heating up, you can get some of your ingredients for the first layer prepared. The recipe calls for finely chopped almonds. If you want to chop them by hand, start with some almond slivers. Ground almonds that you will buy are probably too fine for this and won't give you a nice consistency. So I meet it halfway and just put the slivers in a small blender. And careful, you only want a few pulses because else you will end up with ground almonds. So just do that briefly. What you want to do is you want to have them ground up with still a few pieces in there for texture, so that's just fine. And put your hand over the pan just to see when it starts to feel warm. You can add your dry stuff first. Now, what's important when you're doing a double boiler improvised like this is not have the heat up so high that the steam comes up the side. This is a really good habit to get into, especially if you start working with chocolate. Even though this is cocoa, if you get water in it, it can seize up and just become useless. Once your stuff's in there, just get a butter knife for the butter and just start cutting chunks off of it. It will melt faster this way. This you want to just melt and mix in. You don't want it to come to a boil. You will be cooking it slightly for the egg, but basically just until it sets. So once all the butter is in there, another reason not to turn up the heat too high is that if you've got steam coming up the sides, it's going to burn you and it'll be too hot to touch the bowl. Now this is going to start to happen fairly quickly, and if it does get too hot, just get like a damp paper towel that you can keep a light grip on the bowl so it doesn't go everywhere. It's looking a bit gritty because I use organic cane sugar. If you want to use white sugar, that's fine. I would not recommend brown sugar for this. You're going to get a completely different taste that won't match the traditional recipe flavor. When all of it is melted and it's nice and glossy looking like that, get the egg, add it all at once. And here you want the heat actually really not too high because you don't want the egg to cook in clumps. You want it to cook but nice and even. Now if you see the butter start to separate in here, that's fine. What you're looking for, and it's hard to see in here, is the mass itself, the non-liquid part, starting to come together and get a nice glossy creamy appearance. That means the egg is cooked. And once that's done, toss in the almonds. And at this point you're safe to just take the whole bowl off the heat because it's going to get hard to mix. Then the coconut. This will cool off fairly quickly. If it gets too hard to work, you can always just quickly pop it over the hot water again. And the graham crumbs. Just pick it up from the bottom. Get the dry crumbs out, fold it over, press it down. Keep doing that till it's all incorporated. I use a glass pan for this. I love glass pans. And you don't grease this because of the butter in here. And just basically put all that in. And you can see the bowl is nearly clean. And I am going to clean this right away after because I'll need it again. So get your spatula if you want to use the spatula. I am now going to abandon the spatula to get a glove because I just think that's so much easier and faster. And if you don't have a glove, you can get like a square of parchment and put it over that and use your hand. The bottom is supposed to be very dense, so don't worry about pushing it down. Yeah, this is slightly warm and not hot to the touch at all. So I'm fine to put it in the fridge right away to chill. Now for this to go quicker, you don't have to cut the pieces as small, but I find the butter always creams better if you cut it in chunks first. And since I don't want to wash my tablespoon between additions, I'm just going to do the custard first. Dry before wet always. So there's one. So add 1 tablespoon of cream at a time. Now if you find that it's not creaming to your satisfaction, which can happen depending on the temperature and weather conditions, what you can do is just stop it and put in a spoon of the icing sugar, or 2. And you'll see that'll thicken things up pretty quick. I use the spoon because I've learned from experience that if you dump a bowl of icing sugar into a mixture like this, half of it tends to end up on the counter. Takes a little longer, but you don't lose any ingredients and there's no mess. Done. Now it's going to be a lot drier, so resist the temptation to crank it because you'll just get this cloud. Scrape down the sides one last time. When you can hear it make slapping noises like that, you can wipe down the sides to get a really nice even consistency. This part isn't necessary, but considering how much work this is and how wonderful it's going to turn out, what's a little bit more effort, eh? This should be fluffy and thick at the same time. So what you want to do is just put little dabs like that around. And this is strictly spatula, no gloves for this part. Half it would stick to the gloves. So spread out nice and even as you can with your spatula. Be really careful to try not to pick up crumbs from the bottom. It should have chilled enough that shouldn't be an issue unless you got a couple of strays. And even if you've had these from a bakery or the store, well, not to blow my own horn excessively, but I had people say, who are experienced tasters of these, if you will, being in Canada, that they have never tasted anything like these ones. One of the tricks, I think, is the unsweetened coconut, because an excessively sweet texture taste to this just throws off the balance. So when that's even, pop that back in the fridge. I've cleaned and dried the bowl. This is very important. And the spatula. All the utensils must be scrupulously dry or the chocolate will seize. Now, I've chopped 2 tablespoons of butter off a cold pound of butter in the fridge. Now, most recipes I've seen on the net call for, let's get the chocolate in, call for all unsalted butter. They come in sticks. Personally, I'm not buying a 1/3 stick for 2 tablespoons. I just use regular butter. I've always made it like this, and it comes out just nice. Maybe it's that little hint of salt that just gives it that je ne sais quoi. Now, these are called beat up because they're out of the bulk bin at the store. They're semi-sweet squares. If you've never worked with chocolate before, make sure the water's on the lowest heat. I do heat it up first to just kind of speed up the process. It also decreases the risk of getting water from steam vapor into here. If that happens, the chocolate will seize. What that term means is it will form a solid mass, and it is unlikely you will be able to recover it. The reason you do not put the butter in first is if you did that, the water content in the butter could cause the chocolate to seize. So what you do is you just patiently kind of move this around the bottom of the pan until the chocolate is just melted. When you get to the stage that you are chasing around one little nub at the bottom there like that, you're safe to throw the butter in. If you start to feel it thicken up, that is the chocolate reacting to the moisture content in the butter. Very important you keep the spatula moving at this stage. If you've made ganache, you're probably yawning at this point. And again now, when you're chasing around that tiny little speck of butter, turn off the heat, but do not take the bowl off yet. And I'll explain why. If you're all excitable now and you go, great, look how beautiful that is, and you pull the bowl off while it's really hot, you can get a big cloud of steam come up, go over the top, and seize your mixture here, which you don't want after all that work. I'll just let it sit for a sec like this, get the dish out of the fridge. Now you're actually safer to move the entire pan off the heat. And if you're going to lift it up, do it quickly. See that? The steam, pull it away. Also remember to wipe the bottom of the bowl so that when you're going to pour this in, you don't get water coming into the chocolate from the bottom. Now some recipes say let this cool off. I don't see the point because this is already chilled from the fridge. And if you let it cool off, you're just going to have no end of grief trying to get it out of the bowl. So just spatula it in nice and hot. It's actually just warm. Now, 2 ways to do this. Let gravity be your friend. Now it will start to seize up a bit, so that only goes so far be pretty quick. Without, see, I make mistakes to teach. Just kidding. I just screw up too, like everybody else sometimes. Okay? The point of that one was don't pick up the yellow stuff, okay? Because it'll ruin your presentation. Don't scrape it up like sandwich filling. And again, this is an art. If your chocolate is too hot, it will melt the stuff underneath if it hasn't chilled long enough, and so on. And see rule number 1, if they complain, don't give them any. Or don't give them any more, because you already would have given them some. Lovely. Now, you don't have to try to do little designs in it. This dish stands on its own. Let that cool for a minute on the counter, and then pop it in the fridge for the final chill. So here's the Nanaimo bars out of the fridge. You can see it's got a nice gloss to it, and it's not frozen, but it's chilled. What you have to watch for is if you've got pieces in the middle that aren't shiny, that means it's not set. Now, obviously, cut them up into squares. I'm just going to cut through this and try to carve a nice square out of here to show you. This is still a little, what's a good word for it? Unset, yeah. But the knife is in now, and I'm not stopping. See, you can see that part in the middle. I should have waited longer. Some recipes call for overnight, but it ain't happening. Now hopefully I can get a piece out without breaking it. And if I do, I'll have to start again. Okay, here we go. Yeah, it's a little soft, but oh well. The sacrifices we make for art, eh? Yeah, I probably should have let this set a bit more, but oh well, I don't care. So I will have a bite since it's looking at me. Oh. Unless you've ever tasted these, or you just can't describe it, okay? Now, I'm not even going to pretend these are good for you. At first I was going to say, well, it's got coconut, it's got almonds, it's nearly a vegetable, but it is not. So please eat these in moderation. Oh my. I don't think I'm going to have to beg anybody to try these. If you like dessert, you will love these things. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again.